Alright, guys, welcome back again to more Misericorde. Hello? Is everything alright out there? I spoke in a loud whisper, not wanting to wake anyone who may have also been trying to sleep. I got no response, however. I peered out into the second floor hallway. The sconces were still lit, flickering somewhat in the wind. Up ahead, I could hear a door closing. People were still awake, it seemed. I sighed deeply. Was this the hazing that Superior had mentioned this morning? Flora? Is that you? Margaret? Catherine? I could hear faint laughter coming from somewhere down the hall. Curious, I crept forward. I could definitely hear laughter and talking, and what sounded like a lute being strummed. As I walked down the hall, the sounds got closer. I realized they were coming from the door next to the library. The Misericorde? I frowned. It sounded like there was a raucous party taking place behind the door. I was confused and a little hurt. I vaguely knew about the concept of a Misericorde from some of my readings. It was a room where the rules of St. Benedict were lifted and oblates could partake freely in red meat and pork and other delights forbidden to us in the refectory on certain holidays. Only half of the congregation was meant to be allowed in at any given time, and yet it sounded like a full-blown banquet was happening behind this door. And today was no holiday. I really wasn't part of the group, was I? Well, I mean, you're still new too, so it's not like they're gonna immediately trust you. Some of them will, though. I had half a mind to barge in, but I turned around startled. At the end of the hall, illuminated by the sconces, was a tall figure holding a sword. Oh boy. A black goat stood next to them, held by a rope leash. I can't even make it out. I wanted to scream, but I felt paralyzed. The figure wore black robes. There it is. The figure was cloaked in what looked like a nun's habit, only longer, without a white wimple or cowl. They stood taller than any woman I'd ever seen. Slowly, the monster lifted their sword towards me, pointing with a blade, and as it glinted in the fire, I realized that they were wearing a large metal gauntlet. I took a step back. But as soon as I did, the apparition at the end of the hall thrust the blade they held into the air. With a rumbling rush of air, all the sconces in the hallway blew out. For a moment, everything was pitch black. The figure's sword was suddenly wreathed in flame. I could see once more. This creature and their pet were an even stranger sight, lit only by a flaming sword. In the red light of fire, their eyes glinted with an unholy sense of menace. Shadows danced through the hall as the mysterious figure slowly lowered their weapon again, bringing it to rest against the ground. Oh boy. After a moment, they dropped the leash they had been holding on their other hand and raised a finger to their shadowed lips. You trying to silence me? Really? Now? This is kind of freaky. The goat stood still all the same. Assured of my silence, the apparition lowered their hand to the sword's handle. I didn't dare move or make a sound. I was absolutely in their thrall. Now gripping it with both hands, they lifted the burning sword high into the air. Firelight flickered around the hall in an eerie pattern. And then they beheaded the goat in one swift motion. The fire was snuffed out, and I was plunged into purest darkness. As wrong, I want to think it's Eustace just because she kept talking about or bragging about how she was good at killing ducks. Except this is a goat, but it could be. I'm a little uncertain, but she gives me that vibe, or the hooded figure gives me that vibe. I don't know who that is yet. Unable to bear it anymore, I finally screamed. I heard booming metal boots against stone. Fearful that it was the beast bearing down on me, I turned to flee, but got tripped up on my habit. I stumbled to the ground and knocked on my head against the stone so hard I could see stars. I groaned in pain and struggled to find my bearings, but I was quite dazed. After a few moments of scrambling, I realized there was a thin strip of light next to me in the darkness. As the sound of chairs scraping was heard, shadows began to pass over the bright line, and I recognized it was candlelight leaking from underneath the Misericorde door. There was some panic fiddling with a latch, and then the door finally swung open. A few of the sisters huddled around me. Adela was holding a candle and looked by afar the bravest out of the group. Hedwig, are you quite alright? Whatever's the matter? There's an intruder! I lifted a hand weakly to point down the hallway where I'd seen the ghastly apparition. Adela took a few steps that direction, but I lunged forward to grab her frock. No! They're armed! Armed? Yes! There was a monstrous figure at the end of the hall carrying a sword. What? What should we do? Marta and Charity appeared in the Misericorde's doorway. Excuse my awful hearing, but did you say you saw someone with a sword? Heavens above. I thought we were done with that sort of nonsense. Adela had tugged her robe out of my grip and was cautiously walking down the hall. I dragged myself to my feet and made to follow her, the rest of the sisters who had spilled out the Misericorde in tow. Tell me everything that happened, Sister Hedwig. I heard someone knocking on my door, and when I stepped out to investigate, no one was there. So I left the dormitories to see if they had gone down the hall perhaps. And then I saw someone at the end of the hall, carrying a weapon and with a goat in tow. Hold on. A goat? Yes. And then they raised their sword, and the torches blew out. Crumbs, I would have been scared out of me wits. I still am. What happened next? I'm dying to know. I suppose it must have been a he, the more I think about it. He lit his sword aflame and beheaded the goat. But before pointing straight at me, a threat was leveled against me directly. Beheaded a goat, you say? Yes. This is a rather strange story, Hedwig. I understand, but you must believe me. We have reached the end of the hallway, which split in two directions. A large door to the surrounding wall of the abbey was open to our left, wobbling slightly in the wind and creaking softly. Where did this swordsman kill the goat, Hedwig? It would have been, well, here. Just about. I gestured around myself in a circle, but as I looked at the stone floor, I realized there wasn't a speck of blood to be seen. Are you feeling quite alright, Hedwig? You must have been seeing things. No shame in it, mind. There's all sorts of odd things I'm convinced myself I've seen in the dark. And you're in an unfamiliar place and all. No, I saw it. It happened right here. Everyone was looking at me with a mixture of concern and annoyance now. Can we go? It's bleeding cold here. Adela's candle blew out. Everyone yelped. The door that had been easing back and forth in the nighttime air had suddenly slammed shut in the wind. The noise echoed throughout the hall with bone-rattling power. That just about took my poor heart out. Is everyone alright? I was quite shaken myself, but I soon realized that everyone else was chuckling. I'll admit it, that was a pretty good one, Hedwig. Good? Absolutely fiendish. You are a very convincing actress. I was truly bewildered. In the darkness, I could just barely see Marta clutching her chest and catching her breath, but she flashed me an approving smirk. Catherine was attempting to center herself with a deep breath between exasperated chuckles. Adela's face emerged from the darkness in front of me all of a sudden. She had her hands on her hips and she looking at me in mock fury. We must watch out for her in the future. What's going on out here? We heard screaming. My eyes were slowly adjusting to the darkness. I could see that some more of the sisters had emerged from the dormitory, some wearing night clothes. Nothing to worry about. Hedwig was just scared us all witless with a little prank. Ooh, do tell. She gave the most convincing howl to draw us out of the Misericorde, and then cooked up an ingenious story to lead us down here and keep us occupied until the door slammed shut. It gave us all quite a fright. No! Oh, that's good. What did you use, string? Use? Not a trace of twine here. She must have known I'd bang shut sooner or later in the wind. Lucky guess. Hence the cock and bull storytelling once we got here. You can spin a yarn, Edie. I'll give you that. Not half. That's impressive, Hedwig. Hello? What's all this then? Are we having a party in the hallway? Oh, there's Eustace right there. I don't know, I'm a little suspicious of you. The rest of the sisters had caught up. I realized that nearly everyone was here. Catherine, Flora, Adela, Marta, Charity, Margaret, Moira, Darcy, and Eustace were all clamoring around me in the hall, engulfed in an orb of candlelight. All except... Where's Angela? Probably busy seeing if she can fit an even bigger stick up her backside. Who cares? Consider it a mercy that she isn't here, honestly. I'm not sure she would find this so funny. I swallowed nervously. The narrative that this had all been some grand prank of mine had taken hold so hard and fast that I could possibly push back against it. A happy accident, I suppose, given that it was clear as day. There was no blood at the end of the hallway where I had seen the goat beheaded, and no mysterious figure waiting for us brandishing a sword to chase. We should probably get you back to bed lest the superior finds out you've been organizing practical jokes in the middle of the night. Yes, she's been a bit touchy about that sort of thing lately. Oh. Yes, although I expect she was more worried about us hazing the newcomer rather than the newcomer hazing us. Oh, and that reminds me, Hedwig, did you like my prank? Your prank? Everyone looked at her and we walked back towards the dormitories in a huddle. Yes, I knocked on your door and then ran back into my room. A small titter rose up from all the sisters. Dearie me. Oh, silly. You just didn't want me to, but I did it anyway. I was mostly worried you wouldn't make it back without being caught. I'm faster than I look. Or knocking something over. So Eustace asked you to knock on the door. Was Eustace there when you came back, though? It was very funny, Darcy. You gave me quite a scare. I forced a smile as best I could, but inside I was screaming. Were the knock and the horrid apparition two separate events? How was that possible? It was hard to accept, although not half the one you gave us. We had arrived at the Misericorde door, still hanging open in the hall. Flora, shall we continue our game? I had you retreating if memory serves. Actually, I think you might accidentally knocked over the pieces in the confusion when we heard Hedwig scream. No. Oopsie daisy. I think I've had more than enough entertainment for the night, and shall we retire to my dormitory? Likewise. Well, at the very least, no one needs to worry about snuffing out all the torches out before bed. Everyone murmured in agreement. The group migrated back towards the dorms. Everyone was yawning by now. A few people said their goodnights to each other before retreating into their rooms. I mimicked the pleasantries as best I could, but my mind was completely elsewhere. I wanted to grab anyone by the shoulders and scream at them that it hadn't been a prank. That I had really seen a goat slaughtered in the hall, and that any missing evidence was absolutely the work of some witchcraft. I had half a mind to stop Darcy going to sleep and ask her about what she had meant about the Abbey being haunted. Or perhaps more importantly, tell her that her vision had perfectly predicted what had happened. I stood in front of my door arguing with myself, before finally sighing deeply and stepping inside. My mind was racing, but I couldn't ask anyone else to keep pace with me now. Not only was it quite late, but I had narrowly, miraculously perhaps, avoided being branded a lunatic thanks to a lucky gust of wind. I flopped into the mattress. I stared at the ceiling for a few moments, trying to work my breathing back down to a regular pace, trying to unwind the tight strings I could feel around the front of my mind. Rationally, I knew that I should sleep. Even after spending a significant amount of the day resting, I was dead tired. But how could I? What if they came back? What if they came here to... Yeah, I don't blame you. I really was tired. I was very, very tired. And no wonder, for even Satan disguised himself as an angel of... They think I'm a prankster now. After what couldn't have been more than an hour, I awoke with a start and a yelp. After a moment, I realized I was sitting straight up in bed with my fist raised. Sleep may have taken me, however briefly, but I suppose I could at least take some comfort in the discovery that I would have been ready if any attacker had made their way into my room. Whatever good my skinny fist would do against a broadsword, at least. It was dead quiet, save for a light whipping of the wind and a few crows in the distant woods. Excuse me. My eyes adjusted to the darkness after a few moments. I steadied myself, and I crept out of bed, sliding my nightgown over my head. I wasn't going to be able to sleep, not until I could be sure I was safe from whatever horrid creature had menaced me earlier. I placed an ear to the door, just to check if my little squeak upon waking up had alerted anyone. Silence. The stone walls between us were quite thick then. Carefully, I opened my door. Mercifully, it wasn't excessively creaky. Oh, we're doing this again? In the middle of the night? Oh boy. While there was little moonlight leaking in through the threshold to the landing, it was far too dark to go exploring without a light. I remembered Eustace and the others had been holding candles when they came to check on things earlier, so surely there must be. Aha! I hadn't spent much time in the dormitory's main room. Sure enough, there was a pricket holding a slightly droopy candlestick resting on the simple mantel above the fireplace. I held the hand and found the iron hearth cover. I couldn't feel much warmth, but I had to try. The cover was quite heavy. I did my utmost to not make a sound as I pulled it out of the way, just enough to peer into the fireplace itself. Sure enough, a little gust of warmth billowed out. The fire had been banked with ash, just as I had done many times in my cell. Carefully, I stretched my hand into the fireplace to brush some of the gray dust off the embers before touching the candlestick to it. Eventually, the wick took, and I had a little light of my own. I nearly dropped the candle in surprise. A noise had come from one of the adjoining bedrooms. Terrified, I scrambled out of the dormitory as fast as I could, just as one of the doors swung open. I held a hand over the candlestick's flame in an attempt to hide the flickering light. I could hear hushed voices carrying out the room in the hallway. Darce! Darce! What? Where did I put the candle? Oh, I don't know. Damn it! I've got one here, hang on. Give it here then. Honestly, what are you like? Very talented and smart. Not what I was thinking at this particular moment. What's wrong? Nothing. A moment later, I could see orange light emanating through the threshold into the hallway. My breath was shallow and ragged as I tried to stay as quiet as possible, and I was still turned at an awkward angle to hide my own candlelight. Come on then. Yeah, sorry, I thought I heard something. Maybe it's the ghost. Ooh. Let's be careful what we joke about. Who's joking? Eustace had no answer for this and turned away from the landing back into the dormitory. I heard a few footsteps and finally a door closing. As stealthily as I could, I left my hiding place and scurried down the hall. As quietly as I could manage, I moved through the hallway towards the spot where the apparition had emerged. I held for a moment as I passed the Misericorde, straining to hear if anyone was behind the door. If there was, I couldn't hear them. I continued onward, my heart beginning to beat out of my chest. What was I doing? The way I saw things, I was in danger no matter where I was. That thing could either kill me in my sleep or catch me out in the halls. I was woefully unprepared in either scenario, and perhaps, more importantly, I had a wicked sense of curiosity about the whole situation. I padded over to the spot. I was sure I had seen the figure behead the poor creature just before. No blood. The large door that had given us all a start was still closed now, merely wobbling gently in the lighter wind. Slowly but surely, I walked towards the door, scanning the floor for any signs of blood. There was nothing. I reached the large wooden door itself. Presumably, the swordsman would have had to left through this doorway into the night to disappear after the hideous ritual. Curiosity got the better of me. Uh-oh. You know what to say about curiosity, right? With some trepidation, I slowly pushed open the door, hoping that its creaking wouldn't echo down the halls too loudly. I wedged it open just enough to slip through myself, but... not again! The force of the door closing blew out my candle. Still rattled from the sudden sound, I retreated from the doorway. I stood in the near-pitch darkness once again, although this time I felt more irritated than terrified. Pale moonlight leaking through the main hallway was all I had left to navigate with. I held a hand against the wall and slowly walked back the way I came. The windows running along the hallway that looked down to the cloister finally came into view, so I at least had some inkling of where I was now. Heading away from the confounded door, I could see the path back to the hall that my old cell was located in. I stood for a moment taking it in. I felt the supernatural pull toward that old hallway. As I stepped closer, however, I could hear a strange whistling sound. I felt a chill run up my spine and decided that I would actually much prefer to be in bed after all. I headed back to the hallway to the dormitory, past the library and Misericorde. Out of the corner of my eye, however, I saw a black shape below the landing. Here we go again. There was someone in the cloister. I held my breath and watched as the figure paced around the grass. Their head was down, and I realized that they could not yet see me. They were looking away from the landing, although at what I could not determine. My heart was pounding once more. I hid behind the pillar and poked my head around to watch. The figure stood still for a few moments more. A part of me I'd never met bade me stay and observe, too curious to escape just yet. Just who, or what, was this monster? With a dramatic turn, they suddenly left the center of the cloister and disappeared into the shadows around the edge of the lawn. At first, I squinted to try and make out where they were going, until a far more intelligent part of me realized this creature could be heading up the stairs. I crept onwards as quickly and quietly as I could back to the imaginary safety of my bed. It was far too strange out in the halls at night. I made it back inside my small room without a peep, and let out a deep relieved sigh. As well as feeling terrified, I felt a little embarrassed. My first investigative venture had ended without so much as a hint of a clue, but I was also terrified. I got onto the mattress once more, but I dared not shut up my eyes. Instead, I sat facing the door and removed the candle from the pricket I held. The pitiful metal spike would have to serve as my weapon if the ghoul came through my door. They did not appear. I sat like that all night, clinging steadfast to my weapon and going over everything in my head. Before I knew it, morning came. I dutifully leapt out of bed and dressed as quickly as I could. As I pinned my cowl together, I mused over the best way to face the days ahead. I furrowed my brow and concentrated as hard as I could. The mist that had been lingering in my mind since the superior snatched me out of my cell was evidently there to stay, and if I were to make any forward progress on the task at hand, I would simply have to deal with it. First of all, for the health of my own soul, I would strive to attend all services and meals, no matter how terrified I was. However, I may have embarrassed myself on the day prior. It wouldn't do to give up on ingratiating myself to the others. And more to the point, now that I was no longer an anchoress, this is how I would maintain my worship. I could not compromise on this any further than I had already. Mysterious demonic figures be damned. I would not let evil win. I had broken a sacred oath, but I would slip no further. This fear that I felt, the danger that I faced, so be it, I thought. Secondly, Angela was the only sister who didn't show up last night after I screamed. It was quite possible that she was fast asleep or simply didn't care. But it was at that very least something I could follow up on whatever superior next asked if I had any leads. There was plenty else swirling around my head, but it would have to wait. Hello? Just checking. I opened the door to see that Eustace had already turned to leave, apparently satisfied knowing that I was up and about. Darcy saw me and gave a friendly wave before following her bespectacled friend. A few of the others were shuffling out of the dormitories and into the hallway behind her. They seemed to not have noticed me at all. In the chapel, I tried to find myself a spot in the pews that was neither too close or too far away from the others or to be noticeable. What are you doing here all by yourself, Lonesome? So much for that. I smiled weakly at her as she settled in next to me. Service itself went well. I threw myself into the worship, but I had a lingering feeling of shame that I could not shake during prayer. Between breaking my oath and interrupting a service by vomiting all over the place, I was increasingly worried about my standing in the eyes of the Lord. I was worried as hard as I prayed. Perhaps harder, if I'm being entirely truthful. It was with some relief that the liturgy ended when it did. The worries had been winning out for most of the service. Breakfast consisted of a thin, warm oat pottage. It was interesting watching the others eat. For the first time, I felt like I was seeing some of my fellow nuns less than completely put together. Little pieces of conversation floated around the table, but for the most part, was quite the affair. There was nothing for it. Sister Angela? What is it, Sister Hedwig? What did you get up to last night? I slept. I tried to ignore the snorts and giggles that arose from the others. I turned bright red and returned to my meal. So much for that avenue of investigation. It's true, I'm sure. She sleeps like a log. Catherine then leaned over her plate and whispered to me in such a manner that ensured everyone could hear. Don't worry, Hedwig. You'll get her next time. When everyone had finished eating, the superior stood to adjust the table. Everyone shifted in their seats to look more alert. All except for Angela, who had already been sitting with her back perfectly straight throughout the entire meal. Hedwig, Eustace, if you'd follow me. Angela, clear up if you could. Yes, ma'am. Yes, Abbess. Angela made a show of rising to her feet. Of course, Abbess. I could feel her staring daggers into my back as Eustace and I followed the superior outside. She led us inside toward the stairs to the second floor of the main building. Where are we going? To the library. Eustace is going to help you get started with your work. Oh, yes, of course. I was the chronicler now, after all. I realized as we crossed the stairs that I didn't actually know what that meant. I have my own work to do, just so you know. I'm sure Hedwig will only need your assistance with the very basics. The library was a very odd room indeed. I pictured it as a regimented hall with organized bookshelves lining the walls, perhaps with a long table in the middle for shared reading space. In reality, it was certainly a room with bookshelves and a table, but it was as if someone had squashed the idea in my head to fit into this second floor room. The table was off kilter. The books were scattered across the shelves, seemingly at random. It isn't much. It's wonderful. I could see Eustace raising an eyebrow out of the corner of my eye. I suppose she had expected me to balk at the state of the room, but I was thrilled to be in the presence of so much scripture again. Not only that, but there was something about the disorganization that spoke to me. It certainly had the most charm of any of the rooms beyond my cell I'd visited yet. You surprised me. Thank you for the vote of confidence. It is rather topsy-turvy in here. I have a system. Have I ever lost anything? I suppose I cannot argue with results. That's right. Anyway, this desk in the corner, this was Catherine's. You'll be sharing this space with Eustace often, I imagine. I see. I was led to a little desk in the corner closest to the hallway door. I hadn't noticed it when we'd walked in. The whole thing was obscured by a pile of books and folded up documents. It was almost like I had my own little room with walls I could peer over. These large books are what you'll be writing in. And I'll be writing? The events of each day previous as well as the details of any important correspondence. Oh, right. Of course, chronicling. I tapped my forehead in an attempt to make a knowing gesture. Eustace will sort through any mail we receive and put anything important on your desk to be noted. Then, you can pass the documents to her for filing. I have a system. Well, if you have any more questions, I'm sure Eustace would be happy to assist you. I must go and make my rounds with the elder sisters before attending to my own work. Eustace and I gave bowing nods to the abbess as she left the room. You know, I just noticed that the superior has a very similar height to the hooded figure that killed the goat. Just pointing out a theory. As soon as the door was closed, Eustace shuffled over to her own desk on the opposite side of the room to mine, with its own piles of bric-a-brac threatening to topple over at any minute. I drummed my fingers on the desk for a moment before reaching for one of the massive empty books the superior had indicated. I opened it up and marveled at the blank pages. For the first time in a while, I felt like I was back where I belong. That is, until I picked up a quill. I soon realized that without scripture to transcribe, I was at a total loss, confronted with white paper. What should I write, do you think? That's your job, not mine. Yes, well, it's all a bit new to me, now that I think about it. I would have thought you'd given it quite a bit of thought before deciding to leave your cell. Well, I wanted to say that I hadn't decided that at all, but I couldn't. Be that as it may, it is a little different actually, being here. What are you working on? Cataloging. What's that? It's something that's very difficult to do if someone is talking to you. Oh, I'm sorry. We sat in silence for a minute. I stared at the blank pages in front of me again for a moment, feeling a little stung. Come on, I'll show you. I hadn't noticed Eustace walking over to my side of the room. She was looking over my wall of books with no nonsense expression on her face. I stood up, not wanting to irritate her any further. The library here houses a lot of scripture, obviously, but it also carries many other books and documents. For example, recipes, or songbooks. Over here we have a little chess section. A whole section for chess? Yes. I didn't intend for it. Things just sort of ended that way. How's that? Well, I have a small budget for procuring requests, and some people here got really into chess. I see. Let's see, some gardening books, Darcy reads those obviously, some history books, tarot. What on earth is tarot? You know, fortune-telling. Fortune-telling? Who on earth would meddle with that kind of thing here? You'd be surprised. I grimaced. The more I discovered about this abbey, the more it felt like it was occupied by a horde of Sarah Bates. Sarah Bates? Eustace ran her fingers over the spines of some of the books, clearly looking for something.